What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel for another unplanned Battlefield 6 beta video, this time on the ROG Ally X. Quite a few of you guys actually asked me to take a look at this after my MSI Claw 8 AI Plus video, and it actually does run better on the ROG Ally X, and that's thanks to not having the CPU bottlenecks that the Claw has. Usually the Claw will beat out the AMD Z1 Extreme devices like my Ally X here in a lot of games, but those are specifically like GPU heavier games. When it gets really CPU heavy, something like the Z1 Extreme does tend to run a bit better. We're on the newer drivers here that ASUS put out on August 7th or August 8th of 2025 here, so this does allow us to play Battlefield 6 beta. If you're not on these, it tends to not want to launch for you. We're pretty much just running on low settings, trying to get as much FPS as possible out of this, and we're going to have options when it comes to FSR, XeSS, and all that in here. I stuck with the FSR for this video with and without frame generation and messed with performance and balanced on the upscaling, but there's plenty of room here to play around, and when the game actually launches in October, I'll get a lot deeper into more options for settings and what performance is like when we get that far. Now all the motion blur stuff is turned off, and we're starting off at 1080p, which was surprisingly decent here. We'll also take a look at 720p, which I think is great, and some 900. But at 1080p, like I said, over the MSI Claw that I had tested before, this is actually pretty good, very similar when it comes to the actual FPS and performance that we're getting, but you don't have near the stutters or frame time issues because we're not bumping up against our CPU limits here when it comes to the Z1 Extreme, and that's at 25 watts here handheld plugged into my capture card. So everything working really well here and felt pretty great. Now we'll get into frame gen here in just a minute and take a look at that too, because it'll essentially double your frame rate. It doesn't quite get there at 1080p. It'll be more like in the 80s when we get there, but I thought overall this is a pretty good experience and worked pretty decently here considering what I'm working with. Now turning frame generation on with FSR here was actually really good. The implementation is pretty decent here. It was working much better for me than over on the Claw when I tried it, but we didn't have full XeSS working for me over there at the time, so hopefully I'll get to test that out more later on. But here on this device with frame generation on, while I wouldn't necessarily be a fan of it in anything competitive multiplayer, maybe more in the single player campaign, I did want to check it out and was surprised at how well it was doing, and I did use the anti-lag feature, which honestly, on or off, I really do struggle to tell much difference, at least in the last couple of games I've tried that on. Now going to 720p here with no frame generation will often get us more into that 60 and above range and be about 10 FPS, maybe a little higher at balance here versus performance on that 1080p. So it works pretty well, and I will say that testing this game out, I've tested a lot of newer games coming out with FSR and having to run low settings and 720p and all that, and a lot of newer games look horrible running on those kind of settings. And I'll be honest, Battlefield 6 actually so far, for what you're getting here, looks better than a lot of newer games I've been testing at these kinds of settings. And if you've been watching a lot of videos on that, I think you'll probably agree and see what I'm talking about. Now if you turn frame generation on here at the 720p, because of that higher base frame rate, we're really going to get up there when it comes to our frame rate here, and frame times are super smooth. And again, even though I'm not a huge fan of using frame generation in some kind of competitive multiplayer, I actually did feel pretty good here for the most part. I could feel the little bit of lag that I don't prefer, especially using a controller here versus maybe being hooked up and using my mouse, which I much prefer with Battlefield over a controller. But yeah, it did feel pretty good and was pretty doable here. And I think once you get down to that 7-inch screen and you're really playing in handheld mode with BRR on and everything like that, it's a pretty decent experience overall. I ran around on a bunch of different maps too, or at least what they have available here. I even played some different modes and things just to kind of see how it was, and for me, performance was pretty consistent no matter where I went, which was nice to see. Good frame times, good frame rate with or without frame generation. I think 720p, especially if you're not docked and you're on the smaller screen, is the way to go. And in a game like this, we want as little latency as possible, or at least as high as frame rate as possible, or those two combined, and I think we were able to pull that off pretty well here. I didn't get into a lot of 900p, but that's going to be a spot a lot of people like to play at as well. For a game like this, I'd rather just go the full 720 and really push the frames out of it, but 900p worked just fine as well, running around a few of these maps of what you would expect, performance right between 720p and 1080p, and we ran balanced here on FSR as well, and ran around a couple of different maps and things like that. Of course, when it gets busy, you are still going to drop in your actual FPS, but it held the frame times really well, and gameplay stayed feeling great. I'm actually really impressed at the optimization of Battlefield 6 over Battlefield 2042, or even some of the newer Call of Duty stuff, and a bunch of other games that have been coming out. Considering how good this game even looks at low using FSR here and stuff, it really makes me even more disappointed in some of those newer, especially single player games I've been testing lately that just look really rough on low settings with FSR or even XeSS sometimes and that type of thing. But anyways, I think Battlefield 6 is on the right path here, at least with performance, and I'm having a blast with the game. And it looks like one of those that's actually going to be very playable when it comes to the handhelds, which is nice to see. So anyways, guys, just a quick look here. You wanted me to do it, so I put it together here to check out this beta running on the ROG Ally X. I would do the Legion Go, but there are no drivers currently that I have that are launching Battlefield 6. They're all failing out. I would have to sideload this new asus driver that came out a couple of weeks ago, and I haven't gotten around to doing that yet. So this will probably be the last one for the beta for now, and we'll get into the actual game when it launches. Alright guys, as always, thanks a lot for coming to check out the video. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.